All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. We got huge breaking NFL news here just came out. The Buffalo Bills are trading wide receiver Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. To me, this is a win-win for both teams involved, right? I think when we take a look at Houston, and by the way, I know a lot of people are looking at Buffalo like, oh my God, they only got a second-round pick. I'll explain why I think it's a win in a second, but if you're the Houston Texans here, talk about giving your young quarterback weapons, giving your quarterback enough help. We see it time and time again. These teams, they land their star quarterback and they say, okay, do everything now. We'll invest money in the defense or what have you. The Houston Texans are not doing that. They are making sure that CJ Stroud has enough help around him. Man, they are loading the squad up offensively. Stefon Diggs is pretty much a lock to be a 1,000+ yard wide receiver every single season. He's been that way for the last, I want to say, 4 to 5 years. He was a stud in Minnesota. He was a stud in Buffalo. Stefon Diggs is a really good football player, really good wide receiver. But I think when we look at Houston's roster, you're adding somebody who's been to the playoffs multiple times, somebody who's going to be able to pass along a lot of knowledge and just football experience to the younger guys on the roster, right? The Nico Collins of the world, the Tank Dells of the world. I think this move was huge. I think this move was awesome for the Houston Texans, and they're only giving away a 2025 second-round pick here, which is flat out awesome. And yes, they did trade their first-round pick, so they don't have a first-round pick. That was obviously moved with the, ironically enough, the Vikings, right? Diggs' old team. But in any case, right, the Houston Texans are a much better football team with Stefon Diggs on the roster. Now, when we look at Buffalo and their side of it, Stefon Diggs, quite frankly, has been a headache for a while now, right? He's been somewhat of a distraction. Yes, he has been the number one wide receiver on that Bills team, but here's the reality. He's 31 years old. He was under contract through 2028. He's 31 years old getting paid a ton of cash, right? He's a $27.8 million cap hit for this season, 27.3 in 2025, 28.4 in 2026, 22.5 in 2027. Now, of course, he doesn't have any guaranteed money in 2025 through 2027, but the point remains the same. The Buffalo Bills are moving on from, again, a guy who has been considered, by many a bit of a distraction, who's 31. It does kind of feel like Buffalo is maybe moving on a year too early as opposed to moving on a year too late here. So the Bills are getting rid of a lot of the financial overhead with Stefon Diggs here. You're eliminating a distraction. You're getting a future second-round pick. They have enough cap space to continue to add to the wide receiver room. I would actually feel like Tyler Boyd would make a ton of sense for the Buffalo Bills. Now, of course, I'm not saying, Tyler Boyd is going to replace Stefon Diggs' numbers, right? Obviously not. But he could kind of cut into that. He would be coming in at a much cheaper price. And then also, too, it's the unfortunate reality. These wide receivers they're not going for much. Deontay Johnson got traded for hardly anything at all. Jerry Jeudy was, a 5th and a 6th round pick? For Diggs and a big contract at 31 years old, he's not going to net a first round pick back in return. We could look at the A.J. Brown trade that was, made a couple years ago. Like, these receivers, especially too, in a wide receiver deep class, they're not going for a lot. They just aren't. Again, it's the unfortunate reality. Right, I'm sure Bills fans would love to have a first round pick, and so they traded for Diggs in the first place. But again, it's just not the world that we're living in right now. And then of course, again, this class is really deep, right? So the Bills can go out and draft Mitchell from Texas, Franklin from Oregon. In my opinion, I really feel like you can go out and get an absolute stud in the bottom of round one. You're looking at all those teams around Detroit, Kansas City, Baltimore, Tampa Bay. Like, there's a bunch of teams that need wide receivers right there. And who knows? I personally wouldn't rule out a Buffalo Bills trade up, right? Do they all of a sudden want to take their new draft compensation and shoot up into the top 15 for a Brian Thomas to get ahead of Cincinnati and Jacksonville? Maybe, right? I wouldn't rule it out. But one thing I'm actually pretty interested to see is, will the Buffalo Bills run more 2 tight end sets and attack teams over the middle of the field? Josh Allen is deadly over the middle of the field, especially if he's extending plays. You have Kincaid, first round pick last year. Knox, obviously a big time receiving threat. You can go out and draft a receiver in round. You can go out and draft that perimeter wide receiver. You brought in Curtis Samuel. You can sign Tyler Boyd. I really feel like the Buffalo Bills are going to be fine offensively. Josh Allen, to me, didn't really feel like reliant on Stefon Diggs at this stage, right? Maybe early on a little bit, but at this point, it just kind of feels maybe vice versa, right? So I think the bottom line is Houston is getting a playoff veteran, somebody who's consistent. When you look at the numbers, 1,000+ yard receiver every single season. Consistently, he's pretty much penned in for that. He's going to be adding playoff knowledge and going to be helping out some of the young guys. Again, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and whatnot. I really feel like that's going to be beneficial. And also, I think he could give CJ Stroud some help too, right? From just working with Josh Allen, one of the game's best quarterbacks. And even too, playing with Kirk Cousins, playing with Case Keenum, right? Seeing what these guys all did. Because let's face it, Diggs has made the playoffs a ton. He has had a ton of success throughout his career. You don't just luck your way into that with bad quarterback play, right? Like DeAndre Hopkins is like the only dude to go out there, like in recent memory, the last like handful of seasons, to go out and just dominate with just like quarterbacks that are like bottom 5, bottom 10. Where Diggs hasn't really had that situation. He's always had like top of the line quarterbacks. I know Case Keenum isn't like great, but that one year he did look pretty good. And then of course, from Buffalo's perspective, you're getting rid of a distraction, you're adding a draft pick, you're freeing yourself up financially, maybe not so much this season with like the dead money, post-trade reaction here, post-trade implication. I believe the Bills will have to like take on $30 million of dead cap, which is a freaking ton. But again, it's clearing you up down the road. I really feel it, and again, I really don't feel like the Buffalo Bills offense was like reliant on Stefon Diggs to have success. I talk to Bills fans pretty much all the time, and they always reference like the Diggs drop, and it just kind of seemed like the relationship was just at its end. And, if you go out and you draft somebody in round 1, again, you can bring in a Tyler Boyd. You can maybe utilize Dawson Knox more in the passing game. I don't think this move gets done without, like, the approval of Joe Brady. And sorry, I got a lawnmower going out outside. That's what the buzzing is. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. And as always, go Jets.